Our reading this morning is going to be taken from the book of Matthew, Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 30. Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 30. You have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you that whosoever looks at a woman in lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. For it's more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. And if your right hand curses you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell.
Good morning, church family. Isn't it great to be a Christian, to be alive today, to worship the God of the universe? Hope we woke up this morning thinking about that, the awesome privilege we have that He's given us, health to come and to enjoy our blessings together. Thankful for you, praying for many who are away from us, some still on vacation, other things, some obviously are working. We come here from all different backgrounds. Some are kind of at a mountaintop as far as spiritual strength. Others are in the valley. Some struggling, some new in their faith, eager to learn. So I hope we will continue to rally around one another, to encourage and to build one another up. Parker has a birthday today and is leading singing for the first time ever on his birthday. Of course, if I was that young, wouldn't be too many opportunities before that, but I'm glad he's here to do that. We will have at our 5 o'clock service tonight the Nicaragua Mission Report. We'll also have about a dozen, I think, from the East Ridge congregation, Chattanooga area, with us tonight. Other visitors locally, some that were part of that trip back in June. And so I know you'll enjoy what Greg and others have prepared and are preparing for that. It's great that we can feel a sense of camaraderie. Many who didn't go in physical presence supported it, obviously in prayers, some others financially, but just the investment spiritually that was made there. Thankful we can do these things and that they're a blessing. Hope we never take these for granted either. So I encourage you, 5 o'clock tonight, to be back with us. We're looking at a lesson this morning that is a needed lesson. It kind of reminds me of the lady that told her preacher during a series he was doing on the 10 Commandments, "I wish you wouldn't preach about that stuff so much. It's planting a lot of ideas in folks' heads." And so I think his response basically was, you know what, the ideas are there. It's not that when you talk about sin that people are automatically going to start thinking about, hey, I hadn't thought about that one. We are in a society that is awash in many immoral, very ungodly things. And the one we're talking about today is not the most pleasant to discuss, and yet I can't think of a more appropriate or maybe relevant topic than the one we're looking at today. Principles, not specifics that have to do with pornography. I don't think anybody is unaware of where we're going with this. I think the title probably just about says it all. You can know the feelings that I have about it, that I'm convinced are influence from God. And that is that pornography pollutes. And I wish we could end the pollution that is going on in our world today. I can't do a lot about folks outside there. I can't do a lot about you there. I can do what I can about me. And so may I challenge each of us individually to think about how this lesson applies and do what we can. I believe that Matthew 5:27, just read in our hearing, may be the clearest passage, obviously from the lips of Jesus, that address a principle that can lead to a practice. Jesus says, in the context of several other Old Testament scriptures, you've heard this, most of the time quoting from the Old Testament law, but I'm telling you, now in my kingdom soon to be established, this commandment is modified, it is altered, in most cases intensified, to where not only is murder wrong, but also the anger behind it. And not only is adultery wrong, but the lust that precedes it. When you get Jesus addressing the heart of the matter, when we get into the kingdom that we're still a part of and how these things apply to us, I know that you don't have to have pornography to lust, but it is an enhancer. Its purpose, its reason for existence is to feed a lust and a desire there in an unhealthy way. And I want to make sure that everybody knows what we're talking about as we think about pornography. This is one of those lessons you have to be careful. I'm aware of our audience. There are some young ears and some young eyes, and so I don't want to cross a line. I don't want to do anything for shock value. Nothing that I'm going to share really is something you have to hide eyes about. And yet I want to make you aware of some things happening in our world today that a lot of people think are wonderful, that are very liberating, that are very modern. And we just about as well get on board with these things. And there's a 50 Shades trilogy. I think maybe in the local movie rental places, you can see at least that first one there. Pornographic literature that a lot of people have I guess, just praised. This is a very, very artistic expression here. I'm not holding that up because I encourage you to read or to watch any of the movies that'll be a part of that, but rather to illustrate this is what we're discussing when we're talking about pornography. Magic Mike, there's one, and now or the second edition of that. And you know, sometimes we think this is all about the guys here. No, this is a mainstream increase in that which solicits even the females to think about a lustful depiction there and things that will feed an appetite that, again, has no business being done. Many of us, if we have satellite or cable, may be subscribing to channels that I would discourage you because of the great concentration most of them have in their programming to a lot of things that are immoral. One of the chief being things that are very pornographic. Used to be, as we'll acknowledge, that you just about had to go searching for nudity or near nudity or things to satisfy that thirst in you if you had it. No, it is all too available to us. Too many references out there. It is a matter of just a few seconds or a few mouse clicks or a few presses of a button to satisfy a fix that so many people think is harmless. I hear people sometimes saying things like, Jesus never condemned pornography. Show me a chapter and verse in the Bible where Jesus says, thou shalt not watch pornography. Like a lot of things where Jesus very clearly never forbade the use of recreational drugs, or never in so many words says, thou shalt not practice homosexually. When there are principles very clearly about what is authorized, we can make deductions. We can know that just because something isn't spoken of explicitly, there are still principles that are at play here. I want us to think about some of those. I believe that even in the church, and I'll give you some evidence of that, some statistics that are shocking to me, that are alarming and deserve our attention. There is harm, not just looking at a few, what the world would call dirty pictures, or maybe what the world formerly used to call that way. Now, somehow we've redefined everything, and now it's enlightening, and it's progressive, and it's mature to do those. We have a deluge, if you will, a flood of information coming in almost unchecked. Laws that have been on the books that in many cases maybe still are there that prohibit this and would censor indecency. I think it's been kind of one of those things that people have thrown their hands up and said, well, what's the use? Where do you even start prosecuting that anymore? The floodgates are open. We can't possibly stem the tide, turn it back, get a handle on this, and so an ever-increasing problem faces us. I'm maddened to think about how that Satan has cheapened. In many cases, this isn't the only one. Looked at the good that comes from God. Satan has no intrinsic good, can do nothing that is pure, but he wants to take what is wholesome and godly and meant to be used in a good way and attain it, all the while having us think that this is actually better. Kind of like the forbidden fruit in Eden. He tries to paint this wonderful picture to Adam and Eve that this forbidden fruit, this that God said you couldn't have is helpful to you. You're hurting yourself if you don't indulge in this thing. May I ask us to simply open our eyes to the truth that this is harmful and this will be no good for us. Let me talk about the good that God gave in the urge. We have physical appetites. When we are hungry, the belly rumbles. We're thirsty, we know that we better be satisfying that thirst. There are other things. We desire warmth when it's cold, and we desire cool when it's warm. There is a sexual urge. There is a drive that God placed within humanity, and there is a satisfactory way to express that, to tap into it, to utilize it. Just as surely as there is an unhealthy and an unwholesome and an impure way to do that. People that say, I have a desire, I have to satisfy it. Is that right? I love chocolate, okay? I love sweets, and I love steaks, and I love a lot of fattening, greasy foods. And I tell you what, I eat more of a lot of that than I should, but just because I have a yearning for something, does that mean that I ought to sit down and satisfy it every time? I'm telling you what, I could go to a clothing store and there wouldn't be suits big enough to put on this old body if I simply said, every time I think about eating something, I'm going to eat it. I don't care what happens. I'm just going to satisfy this longing, this craving. Why? Because God put it in me. It's His fault. The lust that is our first sexual appetite and expression, while God-given, but used within the parameters and with the controls and checks God has, is a beautiful thing. It hurts me to know that even our young people, many of them will never know what it's like to have a healthy view of sex unless it's informed by the Word of God. Sometimes we have thrown the baby out with the bathwater, and we've decided all sex is bad and it's tainted and it's devilish, and yet that's not the way it was designed. Let's hold up and just embrace the beauty and the good that's there while discriminating and realizing not all of it is. And often what is being portrayed as good and enjoyable and okay for you to partake in, biblically speaking, is not. Let me take you to Mark chapter 7. Mark 7, I want to read verses 20 through 23. And in the context, as you're turning there were folks that were criticizing the disciples of Jesus for eating with unwashed hands. And there's a lengthy discussion in this chapter and how there were these ritual washings of even cups and different vessels, and the Pharisees had man-made laws that they took great pride in formulating. But their concern is defilement, contamination from the outside in. Jesus says, wait just a minute. Let me tell you about true heart defilement. It is inside out. And so in verse 20, what comes out of the man, that defiles a man. For from within, I want you to see what Jesus knows about each one of us. Out of the heart of men proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these, Jesus called them evil things, come from within and defile a man. I'm aware, and I want you to be as well, not every one of these is sexual sins. Some of them are. The adulteries, fornications, licentiousness. Your Bible may have the word lasciviousness there, or just merely lust. Jesus lumps some sexual sin in there. And he says, I know where its beginning place is, and I want you to know that when these things aren't checked, when they're not controlled, they defile you. They're inward. They may be outwardly expressed. They may be outwardly a means of defilement, but it comes from within. Satan is trying to convince us that basically you ought to do anything you want to do, that you're big enough to do, that whether it's lawful or not, you can do, just because others are doing it, or that, again, you're robbing yourself. You're cheating yourself because of that. Well, we're talking about pornography, and again, I want to be as careful as I can. I want to talk about generalities enough, but be specific enough as well that we realize it for the danger that it is. I want to ask you a good question. This is not original with me. Jeff Hamilton asked a question for our consideration. Why would a person want to fill his mind, or let me add her mind, to fill their mind with the desire for something he or she cannot righteously do? Philippians 4:8 has Paul saying the things that are true and honest and just and pure and lovely and of good report, the praiseworthy things. Think on these, meditate, let your mind dwell on those things. Those are broad categories, aren't they? Pure and honest and just. If I'm allowing my mind to think about the right things, and I realize again there are wrong things, what good does thinking about the wrong ever do? How can it go from unrighteous in thought to being righteous in behavior? That's a good question, isn't it? Imagine that if you're on a diet, you're on a restricted diet, there are certain things that you can't eat, and on that diet, you decide to look at all the forbidden food, whether it's sweets or red meat or whatever, and you order a catalog. And that catalog has these foods portrayed in the most appealing way. I mean, just delightful. You just almost want to eat the page looking at it. Now, you can't have it. And yet, would it be smart for you to say, although I can't have it, I'm going to do this substitute. I'm going to look at this stuff. My mouth is going to be watering. I'll be slobbering all over the place just imagining what that would taste like. I'm going to tell you what, if you're really on a diet, and it's important for your health that you don't consume these things, I'm not really going to be in agreement. I'm not going to help you and encourage you to be looking at those things that are forbidden to you. In a sense, if you catch where I'm going with this, pornography is kind of like that. It kind of holds out the hope that looking at this, listening to this, watching this will satisfy an urge, but really it doesn't completely do it. It can't do it. In fact, it kind of increases the appetite. It channels it in a different direction. It reprograms the mind even so that what is the hope and the promise of fulfillment actually is something very different than that. And just as surely as a person on that restricted diet probably is going to be tempted before long to go beyond just looking at it to partaking of it, many times people have found, not surprising to trace the progression, it's not enough just to see anymore. There is something else further that will now hold the promise of fulfilling. And yet when I do that, then there's something else beyond that. It spirals out of control. It is an addictive thing. I listened about 2 years ago at Freed Hardeman's lectureship to Mark Scott talk about a very detailed lesson on pornography. He says, if you'll think with me about it this way, he says, if you look at a stool, let's have a three-legged stool that you have in your mind here. It's important you have at least 3 legs. Now, 4, 5, 6 may be better, but 3 legs. I'm going to give you a measure of stability. Let's knock out one of those legs. So you've got a stool with just 2. How's your balance? You ever try to sit on a 2-legged stool? Well, let's take out just one more. You got 1 too many. You got a stool with 1 leg. It's a unicycle without the wheel. And imagine trying to balance that to stay upright on a stool with 1 leg. The more legs you get, the more stability. It used to be that pornography was kind of like a 1-legged stool. It wasn't easy to access, and you couldn't afford it if you wanted to, and the anonymity was a problem. You couldn't do it without getting caught, and yet today it's kind of like the stool has 3 legs. The affordability is not a problem anymore. If you think about people that view, watch pornography, that are addicted, hooked on it, what image do you see in your mind? Is there a gender? Is it male? Is it an age? Is it the very young? Is it the very old? May surprise you to know that basically you can't really profile it. You can't ever say, well, it's only happening to males, or it's only happening to ones of certain age or background. It is literally so rampant. There are so many different faces of it, it would surprise you. There was a youth ministers conference, forget how many years ago or exactly where it was, but youth ministers came over, and there was a hotel booked for the purpose of this. There was in-room pornography available for rent. The owner of that hotel talked to the organizer later and said, I want you to know that there was a spike. There was an increase in the amount of pornographic videos that were accessed the weekend when youth ministers had access to this hotel. What does that tell you? Could it have been accidental? I've known youth ministers. I've known preachers. There are elders and deacons and missionaries and Bible class teachers that have gotten hooked and that are hooked today, that may have concealed that problem but still struggle with it. I'm telling you what, Satan knows what he is doing. He is able to take a good impulse, a God-given desire, channel it in directions that are unwholesome, all the while hoping to convince us this is not a problem. Connie Adams says that pornography arouses passions, it distorts reality, creates false and unreasonable expectations in marriage, causes women to be seen as objects rather than persons of worth, reduces people to the level of the brute. When you purchase or consume it, you subsidize evil, contributing to the downfall of souls and of nations. Could not agree with her more. When David said in Psalm 19, verse 14, let the words of my mouth and what? The meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O God, my strength and my Redeemer. The meditations of my heart, Lord, I want them to be pleasing to you. How in the world could I allow my mind and my heart to be feeding on that by definition in Matthew 5:27 is lusting for another, and think that God is going to bless me or be pleased with that behavior? What I'm trying to do is get us to think about this rationally, beyond that even spiritually, to realize it for the problem that it is. 400 million, did you catch that? 400 million sexually explicit websites are available today. It actually may be a little bit higher than that. Things are changing so much. There's literally an explosion there. Someone took the time to think about that and put it in this way. If you took and looked at a news site, a pornographic website, every 10 seconds, it would take you 200 years to view all of them out there currently. When I talk about that AAA, the affordability and the anonymity and the accessibility, former times, if you wanted pornography, you'd order it. You might get a magazine that came in that brown paper wrapping. You didn't go down the street. You didn't have television. You might have a few places you could go in a big city to satisfy that desire. And yet it's very, very different now. And so the accessibility is an issue, and the affordability, a lot of times you couldn't afford it. Now often it's free. That's an issue, isn't it? It's free, but it's not free. I think I saw, was it the Twilight Zone episode? Anybody remember the one where the guy has it's like the fountain, this water that's the fountain of youth, and he's bottling it and selling to folks, and they take it, and by the way, he tells them, the first one's free. First one's free. And they drink it, and overnight they look youthful, and there's an energy about them, and oh, this is wonderful, and I want to buy some more. Why? Because when I wake up without taking it, I age tremendously, and so the addiction is there. I've hooked you. First one's free. It is affordable, and yet is very costly in other ways. The anonymity, used to be that was hard. Now, there again, if you're pretty savvy with the computer, there are ways to safeguard you against it. There are ways to hide and conceal what is being done there. Often, even if people know you're this way, you're simply trumped as a hero. It is sad that often our heroes are the ones that are making the most cheap and tawdry and alluring things out there in the world. Let's talk about another aspect of pornography. Something to think about is the addiction. Here's another A for our consideration. I can't go into details. Most of this would go over your head as it does mine, but there are levels, when they've studied this scientifically, levels of different neurochemicals that are affected when a person is exposed to pornography. The serotonin is one of those. Dopamine, there are elevated levels that are expressed. It hardwires and actually changes, modifies the brain of the one who is a frequent user of it. One of the dangers, and people see this, you can see it often in hindsight, when a person is deep into pornography, people are no longer worthy valuable citizens of God. They are merely tools. Women especially are not looked upon as valuable commodities. They're not looked upon as the creation of God, but rather as an object. She satisfies or exists to satisfy a longing. She's an it, no longer a person. And those who are engulfed in this relate to things, not in any way a healthy or normal approach there. Huffington Post said, as you think about, well, this is a fringe issue. This is a problem that doesn't affect us. Get this. Pornographic sites get more visitors than Netflix and Amazon and Twitter combined. I meant to research this, I didn't, but at one time there were more, even pornographic shops available for ones that wanted a brick and mortar play, more of those than there were McDonald's restaurants in the United States. Don't tell me that it's not an epidemic, that there aren't exposures there, and even that it doesn't affect us in the church. Counselors say that 56% of divorces have at least one person in that marriage obsessed with pornography. 58% consider or suffer loss financially even because of the habit. About a third will lose a job in his or her lifetime because of it. This may surprise you, but 1 in 3 viewers of pornography is female. That is the most rapidly increasing demographic there. In fact, 1 in 6 women will become addicted in her lifetime. Definitely more exposure to the men. It's not without its influence among the female population. Imagine right now, of all the people accessing websites, surfing the web or whatever, do you realize that about 30% right now, if not higher, 3 out of 10 are using it for internet pornography. 1 in 5 searches on a mobile device, we all have them, don't they? Pornography. Here's something that really troubles me. They've studied the average age of first exposure to pornography. Back in 2000, that age was 14 years of age. In the year 2009, that had decreased down to 11 years of age. Last year, the number was 8. Where are we getting this? Where are we seeing it? If you're on a laptop, if you have a mobile device, it is searching you out, obviously. If you watch, not even the premium channels, I guarantee you, there are the things, whether it's a Hardee's commercial or so many, that have the barely clad folks trying to hawk or push a product there. There is unlimited, even billboards that you see. So much of it is radio influence. It is by the music that we listen to that is in every definition also pornographic. And so it is an issue for us. Don't find any easy fixes. Don't know a way that we can safeguard it, especially when some of the other polls are suggesting that between 1/4 and half of so-called Christian men and women regularly view porn. Half. About 20% of those being the women here. Norman Cousins says the trouble with pornography, with this wide open exposure, is not that it corrupts, but that it desensitizes. Not that it unleashes the passions, oh it does, but that it cripples the emotions. Not that it encourages a mature attitude, it can't, but that it is a reversion to an infantile obsession. Not that it removes the blinders, but that it distorts the view. Norman Cousins said, prowess is proclaimed, but love is denied. What we have is not liberation, but dehumanization. Folks, this is a huge problem. Some of you know the name Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was executed because of several crimes, including murder that he was guilty of. I want you to listen to what he said. This was an interview shortly before his execution. This serial killer said, listen, I'm no social scientist. I haven't done a survey. I don't pretend that I know what John Q. Citizen thinks about this, but I've lived in prison for a long time now. And I've met a lot of people, a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like me, all caps. And without exception, without question, every one, all caps, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers is pornography. If I could stop right here and say, I thought you were talking about what's the relationship. Don't have time to show you that. I'd be glad to produce some material for you outside of this lesson, and yet there is a clear association. The FBI's own study on this shows the most common interest is pornography. Well-meaning, decent people will condemn the behavior of a Ted Bundy while they're walking past a magazine rack full of the very kinds of things that send young kids down the road to be Ted Bundys. But I'll tell you, there are a lot of other kids playing in the streets around this country today who are going to be dead tomorrow and the next day and month, because other young people are reading the kinds of things, seeing the kinds of things that are available in the media today. I can't speak from experience, thankfully, about this, but what I read makes me believe that the ones who have researched it, and that is the spiral, the seemingly innocent exposure that begins, the curiosity, the fascination that blossoms into a full-blown thing in which rape and violence and even death is regarded as a commonplace. I mean, all types of sexual deviancy. I guarantee things are going on out there. There are things available at our fingertips most of you wouldn't begin to think about that are happening. And we live in a culture in which sexual crime is rampant. Rapes are occurring on a regular basis. Many of our young people being abused. Not every one of them because of unchecked pornography, but I guarantee you most of them. Most of them because someone said, you know what, this is a harmless desire. What's going to hurt me looking at a few bad pictures here? I can do this in substitute for those others. This will satisfy a longing, a craving. I don't want to act out, and so this is my own little private fantasy world. Friends, it's not that way. Just as surely as the devil held out that fruit that Adam and Eve had been forbidden was going to be something they needed, some have learned all too much the hard way and way too late. Wish I'd never looked. Wish I'd never gotten hooked the first time and let it lead me down this path. I want to encourage all of our families, please take measures to safeguard anything that you've got that's electronic, that has web access. Know what you've got, know who's watching it, make it as public as possible. Parents, inquire, not because you don't trust your kids, but because you love your kids. And if they are being exposed, you need to know about that. You need to talk about what is going on in the confines of your home. Men and women, if you are a casual observer, a viewer, whether unintentionally or not, how can you? I ask yourself, how can I limit this? What are some steps I can take to maybe not totally eradicate the exposure? It is so prominent. But what will I do? Hard measures to keep my heart and my mind pure. To live out Job 31 verse 1, where Job says, I have made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a young woman? I believe very clearly he's talking about that look as a lustful look. I don't want that that's going to cause shame and embarrassment and guilt. You know what? I guarantee you that in our churches, there are so many that are suffering silently. They need a forum. They need to know that there is a place they can go to and resources available to help get us back to healthy, to eliminate this void that is sucking life and spiritual vitality out of us. I would encourage you, if this is you or someone you know in your family, would you contact me or one of our church leaders after service today to get some help and to get some recovery for something that probably is not going to correct itself. Let's be aware of the power of Satan, the allure, the charm, the deceit of the one who is robbing souls, who is wanting another victim. Don't be victimized when you can be a victor through Jesus Christ our Lord. I'm going to close a very negative lesson with a hopeful and an optimistic conclusion. And that is, in Jesus Christ, we have the power to break addiction. We have the power to break the hold and the grasp that sin has, all sin in our lives. And that breaking begins when we obey the gospel, when we listen to the Great Commission teach us, as the apostles were to go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature, with the promise that he who believes and is baptized will be saved. He who does not believe will be condemned. When you begin that journey of faith and obedience, God will be there to bless you, to help you, to give you strength and resources on that road that leads to heaven. Some of you have a heart that condemns you today for any sin, not just this one. If you need prayers today, we'd be happy to take that before the Heavenly Father. Would you come upon together, we stand and sing this song?